Alright guys, so this is the demo for creating an illuminated manuscript. Now looking through the assignment, you already know what an illuminated manuscript is. It's essentially a decorative letter. They used to use these a lot when the monks were making books. And remember, we looked at the Renaissance and how books were actually very, very limited. Only the very wealthy could access literature, and that was because of this process. Monks would spend months and sometimes years creating books, all by hand and all done very, very beautifully. So essentially each book was a work of art. What you're going to do here is create an initial. It can be your first initial, your last initial, or it can really be any initial whatsoever, but it has to be done in the style of an illuminated manuscript, which you should know at this point because you've done your research. So the first thing I'm going to do is line up my ruler, and I'm going to create some guidelines. Now, these are probably too light for you to see, which is probably for the best. You want to, if you're working with watercolor paper, you want to go very, very delicate. So I'm going to turn on my light just so you can see them. You want to not press hard at all, be very, very light, just because these lines will eventually be erased. If you put watercolor paint over top of these lines before you erase them, they are locked in. You can never get rid of them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a second line in here, and these are going to be secondary guidelines. They're going to show me where my letter's going to go and help me be decorative. Now, there's two ways to do this. You can either be creative and free-handed. I highly recommend looking at some of the letters that have been provided to you so that you could do it that way. So what I'm going to do here is the letter A. Now, I've already researched, so I know what I'm doing. This is kind of my second one. I have a first one that's been done in canvas, so I'll just flash that so you can see it, so that you know that I'm not just freehanding this. So this is the first one that I've done already. I'm going to kind of use this design to create a second one for the watercolor demo. So I'm going to use this line, and this is going to be my base. And again, very, very light with your hands. You don't want to put any really dark lines down. But you also want to make sure that you remain decorative. And also that these lines are straight. So they would use straight edges all the time to create these things. It was very rarely freehand. You just want to make sure that those edges are as straight as they can possibly be, so that when you do something like this loop here, it's still within that guideline. So it's still within that edge, so that I don't make it too crazy. It's decorative, but it's still very controlled. Okay, so now I'm going to create and you'll notice as I do it, I kind of have a method of roughing it in first, okay, and then I'll grab my ruler and just refine it a little bit. I don't want it to be completely maniacal and mechanical. I want it to look still natural, but at the same time I'm aware that it is hand done. So like I said, I know how these designs go. I want this to come up, and what I'm doing is creating some spaces within the letter, as was very, very common with illuminated manuscript, and there's going to be designs in there. So here as well, you want to try to maintain the same level of thickness though, so like the thickness here should also be the thickness there. It doesn't have to be exactly, like you don't have to measure it down to the millimeter, but if you eyeball it, it should have that same level of thickness. You don't want one side to look lopsided. Okay, and then I need my center to create the A. And if you're having trouble with this as well, you can always break out the ruler and use that. Alright, so now that I have all these down, I'm going to erase my guidelines. Okay, I don't want these locked in when I put my first watercolor down. So, you gotta clean it all up, make sure that these are all connected. Remember, they're letters, so the lines that I've used here to connect them together, they are going to erase. Then just tidy it up a little bit. Okay, so now I have my letter. This is pretty much the basic thing. What I'm going to do now is just add decorations. And to do that, you need to have referenced your illuminated manuscript. You need to know what kind of decorations are appropriate and which kind of decorations are not appropriate. So that is going to require a lot of looking, researching, and kind of adding this stuff in. So on the whole, I put decorations here. I'm not going to show you all of that. There'll be decoration in here, and in the general area. So even like the light lines where this box is, I might keep those and decorate them. So that's the basics on how to do your illuminated letter. And then the next video will be how to watercolor paint it.